Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Fix Your BS, where BS stands for belief systems. We talk about five major pillars of life. We talk about relationships, business, we talk about money, we talk about health, and we talk about beliefs. And we want to help you find the tips, the strategies, the steps to be the best you can possibly be in one or all of those areas. I really recommend all five. My name is Dr. Greg Persley, also known as Dr. G, your host of Fix Your BS. I wrote a book called Fix Your BS. It's right behind me right here. You can pick it up on Amazon, but you can listen to these and get the ideas that are in that book. Today, I brought an amazing guest. We have Kasey D'Amato. D'Amato is an accomplished business advisor and executive life coach with 20 years of experience as a high-achieving professional across multiple industries. She spoke to my heart is what she did. This is what I absolutely love. So Kasey, thanks for being here. We're looking to share your stories and your insight for everyone to grow themselves.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Awesome. So over 20 years of experience. First of all, you don't even look old enough to have 20 years of experience in something like this. You start when you were like 5 or something like that.
I knew you were going to be my favorite host ever.
Well,
Yeah, it's
you have an interesting background because everybody knows that listens to this. I have a medical background. Started off as a chiropractor. Changed my career path into business because I realized there were so many people that are really talented that get stuck in business uh, with as a key person dependent. They're self-employed. They don't own a business. And so you started out in pharmaceutical sales and got into dermatology and the dermatology practice anyway. And so tell me a little bit about like how you started and the moments that changed your life into, being a consultant and what you're doing now.
yeah, I'm sort of the queen of pivots when it comes to business. I started in sales out of college. Little did I know that that was going to be a very fundamental skill moving forward in my trajectory. And I launched a brand new territory in Miami for a wholesale pharmaceutical company. So I was, an exclusive drug dealer, if you will, for IV injectables to the hospitals in a brand new territory, brand new startup company, very early stage culture. I think I was employee number 7 at that time. And I spent a couple years there. And while I loved it and I was very successful at it, I then expanded and started to launch their Southern California territory as well. I felt like I wanted to do more to help people, and I ended up going to medical school, to get my PA degree at USC, and landed my dream job in dermatology in Santa Monica, California. At that time, I thought that was going to be that's the road. I was like, here I am, I did it. Well, when we have that entrepreneur bug, I'm sure you can relate. It doesn't take long before we're like, what's next? What's next on this journey? And, I started to get involved with the management of the medical practice. It was about a $5 million practice, and I expanded the aesthetic division there. And I started consulting for other medical professionals and started my very first business at that time, which was a consulting business for medical professionals. I still have that, mostly for a salary negotiation and team building and retention and things like that. And those during those early stages, I learned everything from sales to service providing. And at this point, I'm starting to learn management skills because I was managing the medical practice of about 18 people. And again, we have that bug as entrepreneurs. You're like, what's next? And I decided to take on a bigger venture, and I started a skincare company, which was my biggest venture. I raised a couple $1 million in capital and went through multiple different distribution channels. So at this point, I started to learn a little more marketing. We did expand overseas and launched in Europe and South America, and eventually exited that company earlier than we thought. It was during COVID. It was not the planned exit, but it was still a great ride. I learned a lot of skills, partnered with a company that we had a licensing royalty deal. So I took a few years off. I became a certified life coach through Tony Robbins, and decided, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do next? Right. And I decided that it was really my mission to pay forward the different pivots in my trajectory, from sales to service providing to team leadership to starting now at this point 2 different coaching and consulting businesses, to scaling a business, raising capital, exiting, and taking all of those skills and putting them together to help other people, because it wasn't always an upward trajectory. It was a very bumpy road with lots of very dark times where felt like the world was crumbling around me. Lots of years with a lot of revenue lost, a premature exit that was not the exit we wanted with one company, while other areas of businesses that I grew and scaled by multi six figures, multi seven figures, other ones lost that. And so how can I be
So
very
I
authentic
want to
and
talk
help
about that. I want
people?
to unpack that for a minute.
Yes.
I use the word unpack a lot because you,
Yes.
as we tell our stories, there's in that statement, I know because I've lived it as well, there's years of information in that
Years.
one sentence.
Mhm.
And the people that look from the outside a lot of times cast judgment as to where you are. Oh, you're
Yeah.
really successful. I had somebody tell me that this week, and I'm like, well, it depends. Like, maybe I'm not as successful as I could be. I can tell you that. Like, I still have a long way to go. I'm not even as close to as successful as my potential will allow me to be or have. So, I don't know. I'm sure there were moments where you were like, how are we going to get through this week? And yet
Yeah.
people are like, oh, you're really successful. Did you ever experience something like that? Because I know people listening to this do experience that and have experienced that.
1000%. There was a point in time in, gosh, the mid 2015, 2017, right? That period of time, I'm talking years, that felt like there was no way out. I mean, it was drowning. There was drowning in, changing distribution channels. It wasn't working. The leads weren't coming in. The profits weren't there. How are we going to overcome this? Maybe it wasn't the right team. Maybe it wasn't the right leadership. And
Mm,
there was a lot of very dark times when I felt very alone. Trips to, the doctor saying you can't operate under this much stress. You're going to have to make some changes. And really looking within at is, which model am I passionate about? Which business is this a viable business model? Number one. And if it is, how do I fix it? And number two, does this align with my personal goals and the exit? I always do everything with the end in mind. And is this business model going to get me to that endpoint? And is this aligned with what I want for my personal life? And
okay.
those two things have to be in synergy.
I agree with you on that. And I hate to interrupt you again and I do this a lot because what you just said there, it is very uncommon for people to start a business and have an exit plan when they start, or even
Yes.
an idea of exit plan. In fact, one of my favorite books is by a friend of mine, Sharon Lecter, Exit Rich. And the reason why it's one of my favorite is because you're thinking in terms of how do I build a blueprint that makes sense for the biggest potential exit that I can possibly have. And tell me where you got that idea or how you started doing that, because the average individual that starts a business does it the opposite. They go, how big can I get this business? Not what is the market going to bear and how can I set this up to where I have an exit at the end that is maximized?
Yes. I think the two biggest mistakes that people make is exactly your point. Number one, they say, how big can I make this? Or they fall in love with their product and service and not with their client or their customer or patient, depending on the industry. And so they're focused on the wrong things. And always, no matter what, whatever business venture I'm in, or I'm working with somebody, always I'm looking at what is the end in mind. What are we thinking we're going to sell this business? Are we going to sell it? Are we going to eventually shut it down? Or is it going to be a legacy that's going to be handed down to a family member? Because it's really one of those three things. That's what happens to pretty much every business. You're either going to sell it, you're going to shut it down, or you're going to hand it down. That's what's going to happen. So which one is it? Because the way you build your business is a little different depending on what that end goal is. And then from there, backing into if this is our 10-year goal or a 15-year goal, what is now our goal for this 1 year? What is our goal for this one team member for this quarter or this week or this month? And every single thing tracked in metrics that build to the 1 year goal, 10-year, 15-year goal. Those things have to be in alignment if you want to be successful in your business for the long-term exit. Without it, you're going to be on a path of burnout. I know from experience, and exhaustion and stagnation, and what I call a red zone. You're going to hit a red zone in your business that you cannot break through if you do not have your end point in mind and then reverse engineering all of the other steps. And you might pivot along the way, but it creates the roadmap to have some direction for, and it's critical.
And here's the funny part, and I know you've experienced this in your business coaching and consulting, because I've experienced it so many times. That one of the first questions I ask a new client is, "What's the end goal?" And almost never they
Right.
can tell me. I mean, almost never. It's like, they're like, well, just build it as big as I can and then sell it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what does the market bear for that? What will it actually be valued at? And
Yes.
it's funny because I started off as a chiropractor, so I do have a lot of chiropractors that come to me and they think they're going to sell their business for 3 to 4 times the yearly revenue. And I'm like, there's absolutely no way. That is not what the
No
market
way.
bears. It bears at most 75%
Yeah.
of what the yearly revenue was. And they're astounded by that because they think they're going to retire off of it. Most of them are
Yep.
doing a few $100,000 and they're going to sell it for a couple 100,000. And they
Yep.
think, oh, now what? Um,
Yep.
so what would you give as advice? Let's say people are listening to this, they started a business and they probably, most of them don't have an end goal in mind. They don't have a result. What would you
Yeah.
say to somebody at that moment? What are the steps they need to take?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you don't have your end goal in mind, number one is start thinking about it. What is the end goal? And if you're thinking that it's an exit as far as a sale, do some market research because exactly to your point, not every industry, the industries that I've been in, similar to you, my background, I have some medical background similar to you that we don't see those 4 or 5x multiples. In the skincare arena, the other business that I've been in, we see those kind of multiples. So do some market research and what your industry you're in, and if you're planning on exiting, if you're planning on exiting, it's critical that you have your systems in place. Your entire ecosystem can operate without you to some extent, and that you've got all of your KPIs and your key performance indicators on lock, and you really know your customer acquisition data, your retention data, and you're really looking at these more advanced metrics. Now, if you're planning a legacy business and you're going to pass it down to family members and things like that, we're probably looking at profitability, and we're going to need some KPIs and some things, but it might not need to be tracked in the way that it's going to need to be for an acquisition or a merge or partnership or something like that. So I always recommend an exit and a timeline on that exit. Is this business something that is going to be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? How long do you want to be doing this for? And if it isn't something that's going to yield the exit that you are maybe thinking, especially those of us in the medical industry, then what are you doing to either scale, satellite offices, scale this business, or what are you doing to balance your active income with passive income? And so you want to look at how are you going to achieve this exit plan from a revenue standpoint with either the business model, or are you going to balance this with other types of investments so you have two things that are growing that we're going to get you to that end goal that you're looking for?
What's interesting is most people can't see the forest through the trees type deal. They're so focused on now of what needs to happen now that they're not really thinking about that long term and then pulling back and going, what do I need to do? Some of my best work I've ever done was looking at how can I delegate things to other people to pull myself out. And that was something that was really hard when you've built a business for 13 years and you're like, okay, now I need to exit out of my role so that way the business can get bigger and I can start looking at what the next steps are, which is why we took my chiropractic company into an integrated medical, because in the integrated medical, you can get 3 to 5 times EBITDA, whereas in the chiropractic, you get 0.75. So by doing that, I've enhanced the value by millions. And, you know, most people don't think about that. So I did want to ask you this though, because I love you have such great insight and information. In fact, everyone listening needs to go to Instagram and I'm going to have the link. We have it below like we always do, but you can go to Kasey D'Amato. So KASEYDAMATO and go to her Instagram. She's got some great information. I think very undervalued information. There's not as many followers as I'd like to see. You need more followers because there's more people that need to learn. However, great content on there. Really appreciate it. But I wanted to ask you about buy a business versus build a business. What are your thoughts on those two things?
Love that question. If you're going to buy the business, make sure that you understand how to read KPIs and to understand how to read financial statements, and you still have that exit plan in mind. What we see a lot of times is people get excited about buying a business and then really don't understand exactly what they're buying, and then get into it and have to unravel and unpack a little bit of a hot mess between the metrics and maybe the team and the infrastructure. And it's doable. It's very doable. Lots of people come in and buy businesses and fix them, but make sure you know that that's what you're buying and you're paying the price according to that. If you're building a business, on the flip side of things, if you're building a business, then the number one area to be comfortable with in building a business is marketing and networking. Because if you are not comfortable attracting people to you, whether that is online marketing, offline marketing, or networking, you don't have to do any social media. You don't have to do any of those things if you don't want to. If you're going to be at networking events in your local community and shaking hands in person, that counts. But if you're not comfortable attracting people to you, either online or offline, it will be very challenging to build the business. Either you do it or a partner has to do it. So I always tell people, if you're starting a business, marketing and networking has to be second nature, or you need a partner who that's second nature for. Otherwise, you could have the most amazing business or the most amazing service, and you could be the premier expert, but if no one knows about you, your business is never going to get off the ground. And if you're buying a business, just make sure you understand how to read those financial reports, KPIs, and you understand what's going on with the internal team structure.
That is such great advice because that is something I explain to people is take the emotion out of it. I know it's exciting, and I'm sure you would say this too, but always if you're buying a business especially or building either way, but especially if you're buying, make sure you ask yourself what's the worst possible thing that can happen, and if that happens, am I okay with that? Can I survive it? Can I build out of it? Whatever. And that's the way you really need to think because yes, we all have come into the business world like all, rainbows and puppies and ice cream and it's just going to be easy and everything's going to be fantastic. But 0 times has it ever gone the way I thought it would go.
Yes.
It never
Zero
happens
times.
that way.
Yes. Amen to that. Never happens that way.
Yeah. It's going to be exactly like this. No, it's not. It's not. There's going to be things you cannot see because
Exactly.
you don't know yet. Um,
Yes.
but it is one of my favorite things to, and this is going to sound funny because if people that know me long term, but to read P&Ls and balance sheets, once you understand them, you can look through a business pretty quick and go, I don't want to acquire that business.
Yes.
I don't even want to mess with it. We recently looked at a business and tell me what you think about this just for fun. But it was because it was in the functional medicine space. And you obviously have dealt in that space. And we looked at all their numbers. Their numbers look good. They didn't have a lot of debt. But the reason why I passed on it was because the professional that was running the company was so niche that if she left, I didn't know where we'd find another one.
Yeah. That's the issue that a lot of people have. If you are still operating your business as a business operator, as essentially as a solopreneur with a bunch of support administrative people around you, but if you're not there, the business can't operate. It is very challenging to sell that business or put a value on it for somebody else. Because if the entire business is riding only on your reputation and there's nobody else that can provide that service the way you can, you haven't trained other people in your systems processes to get that outcome for your ideal clients or patients, it's very challenging to put a value on that because if you walk away as the owner, that business is going to become very fragile very fast. So the only value to that business becomes the contact information, becomes the Rolodex of emails or phone numbers or, the prior patients or clients. That's the only value because the whole thing could fall apart if you're not there as the owner. So building the team is critical for your mindset. It's critical for your lifestyle. It's critical for the value of your business. It's critical. People are afraid to build their team. And that's one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they're starting and growing early stage businesses is build your team, empower your team, and you will set yourself free now and in the future.
It's interesting, and tell me if you agree with this, but what I found is, and because I always wanted to run businesses and start businesses and whatever, but what I found is that almost nobody wants to start a business or run
Yeah.
a business. So,
Nobody wants to run a business, that's for sure.
well, yeah, right. So when people are worried about training their staff members, because they're worried about somebody leaving and going down the street and starting a business, number one, probably unlikely that they want to do that anyway.
Unlikely.
And number
Unlikely.
two, don't give them a reason to want to do that.
That's
The
right.
only reason people want to do that and take on that risk is if they feel like they're getting screwed over.
That's
So
right.
treat them well, give them everything they need to reach their goals. Pay them well. They'll never leave. Why would they?
Yes. Not everybody has the entrepreneur gene. And I see that a lot. Most people I work with are between, 500K to 6 million in revenue. And a lot of people are afraid to empower their team for exactly what you're saying. Maybe they're going to become competition or they can't do it as well. And all of those things swirl through our brains. But 99% of people are not going to be successful entrepreneurs. They may try, but they're not going to be successful. And if you've built this business, they can't solicit your patients or your clients or your customers. They cannot do that. That's illegal. So if they're going to go and hang up their own shingle and they're going to start from scratch, good luck. So, good luck. If you've already built this machine, and to your point, if you're creating a win-win lucrative structure and everybody's happy and there's a nice work-life balance and flexibility, why would they want to do that? Because that's a big, heavy lift for them when they're already working for something that is rewarding and they're passionate about. And people underestimate asking their team members, what do they want? Just have a conversation with their team member, ask them what they want long term, and help them become that within your organization and reward them for it. And I think people underestimate that, and they hold control so closely of their business. They don't want to empower their team members in that way. Like, hey, you want to be a business owner? Why don't we launch this whole new division and you head it up? Fantastic. This is a win-win. And let's do some profit sharing on this. Great. Empower their leadership drive to step into that, to launch an entire new division or a satellite location or an entirely new campaign, and empower them to do that and reward them on the success of it. Let them be a micro entrepreneur inside your business. Fantastic. I support that all day long. And it's a win-win for everybody.
I don't know if you've heard this phrase, but I've heard the phrase intrapreneur, the
I have heard that a few times.
entrepreneur within the company. Um,
Yes.
but you're so right. How much of fear do you think holds business owners back from the potential of their business?
Yeah, I think that's 100% what holds most people back. The people that don't have the fear, they're soaring. They're already gone. And the people that are stuck, and kind of I break things down to these few red zones where people get stuck in the early stages under 500K, between 500K and 2 million, and then sort of between 2 million and 5 million. And it's almost always fear. There's something that they're afraid of, whether it's the earlier stage, afraid of getting out there and the marketing and the networking and that initial hustle, whether it's the team building portion and in the systems, and all that feels like a drag, right? Because it's not really fun to manage other humans, because humans are humans and they're unpredictable. But people get afraid of these steps, or there's a setback, or there's some issue. Maybe there's a legal issue going on, or maybe there is, some major roadblock in these
Mm.
different stages, and then that just knocks people down and they have a hard time recovering from it. They have a hard time, maybe it's a partnership breakup, business partnership, there's all sorts of different things, or it could be, litigation from other things, and that can sometimes knock people to their knees, and they can't see that there is a way around that and get over it. And guess what, everybody, we've all been through those things. Everybody in business has been through that. So those people who might be listening and thinking like they're going through it right now, we've all been there. And
It's
it's
called
just a
being
matter of
humbled,
keep going.
is what it's being called.
Yes.
It's called being humbled.
Yes.
It's funny. One of the hardest times that I ever went through in business, I reached out to mentors of mine and other entrepreneurs and business owners, and none of them freaked out. None of them were like, "Oh my gosh, what'd you do?" They didn't come down on me. They go, "Yeah, yeah, part of business, man. You
Yeah.
made a business move and you didn't have the right structure to back it up, but you learned something from it and you keep moving." I mean, that's what it's all about, right?
That's what it's all about. All about. Every failure is just learning. That's all it is in business. It's, for those of us that you and I, we come from medical background, and that's not the way that we're trained. There's no room for error. And in
Right.
business, it's all micro failures. And it's hard for a lot of us to understand, especially we're coming from different backgrounds, whether it's medical, corporate, whatever it's coming from, we're ingrained to do a spectacular job every single time. And owning a business and entrepreneurship is the polar opposite. Embrace the failures and the micro failures, because that's when you learn the most. So open your mind up and welcome those. Those are a privilege. Every time you fail, it is a privilege, because you learned a whole lot more during that experience than you would have if things are just going slow and steady. And you're going to pick yourself up and you're going to do it again. You're going to crush it that next round. You're not going to make that same mistake twice. I promise you that.
It's so true. All right. So I got two scenarios for you. Let's say somebody's listening to this and they're like, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting a business." What are some of the first things they should do just to start off, to get an idea of, number one, if that's right for them, or if they're going for the business thing, what should they do to be as successful as possible?
Number one, if you're thinking about starting a business, is napkin math out your model, and meaning the numbers. how many patients, clients, customers are you going to see at X number of, price point, how many per week, per month, and, what is your revenue goal? Are you going to be able to hit this revenue? Will you have enough margin? How much expense will you need to support that growth? Because a lot of people go into a business and they're excited and then they realize, oh wait, this isn't viable. There's not enough cash flow. Cash flow is the bloodline. So number one is model out your business. You can do it on a scrap paper, and it can take you less than an hour to do it. Do it, because that is number one. You do not want to be getting into your business and have a lot of risk or investment of time and money, only to realize, oh my gosh, this model isn't viable. Now I need to try and undo some things and fix them. And you're a little bit late to the game. It's possible, but save yourself a lot of headache and model it out first. Number two, make sure you have market interest. Who wants your service or product, whatever you are creating? Do you know that there is market interest, meaning there's already competitors in that space? Competition is good. That means there is market demand for this thing. And take that another step further. Do you have some people interested? Are there people showing? Is there a community that you have thought leadership in, or have you started an email list or a Facebook group? Is there some group of people that you have a presence in that you can share and announce that you now have this new product or service? So those would be the top two. Number one, model it out, make sure the numbers make sense. And number two, how are you going to get that initial awareness? And people are in front of people who are interested, and prove that there is market interest in this area, and you have some people already showing interest.
Those are absolutely fantastic points. And like you said, model, map out your model, also model other people that are already in the business.
Yes.
Go talk to some people. So many, I've had that happen a lot of times. People get in thinking it's going to be something different than it is. And then
Yes.
they finally get to it. They're like, wait a minute. You're like, you didn't talk to
Yes.
anybody. That goes
Yes.
for me, that goes for their career too. If you're going to get into a career, if you're in college, if you're in high
Yeah.
school and you're going to get into college, go model the people that you think you want to get into career. They're going to tell you their thoughts about it after being in it for a while.
Yes.
So
Definitely. Definitely.
if they were gonna
Yeah.
buy a business, same thing.
Yep. Same thing. Mentors, like to your point, you model or shadow people. I always recommend three level of who's, I call it. So it's a group of people that have done it before you. You want to be talking to people who have done it before you. Something similar, so a similar industry, or they've tackled the distribution or the awareness in a way that you want to go about. So there should be 3 or 4 people that have different types of experience that you are talking to. One that's industry specific for sure, and a couple others that have some unique skill sets that are the way that you want to market and break in. And then your other level of who's are people you're going to collaborate with. So people that you're going to cross pollinate with, network with, share communities with, co-host events with, things like that. And then your third group of who's is the people that are going to help you. So these are, initially you might start out with like a virtual assistant, or you might have somebody that's, doing some marketing or doing some administrative tasks. Then how are you going to build that support underneath you? Then you're next going to have bookkeeping, and you're going to have keep track of your numbers, things like that. So 3 level of who's at all times in business: a group of people with experience, a group of people you're networking, collaborating with, and a group of people that are supporting you.
That is awesome. Great advice. I'm gonna put you on the spot, and I'm gonna ask you this question. And I know you're probably nervous now, like, oh, what does that mean? What's going on? But in the major 5 areas of business: marketing, sales, HR, operations, finances, which do you think is the most important if you had to choose one of those 5 to monitor, track, or to pay attention to?
Ooh,
Marketing, sales, operations, HR, finance.
I'm going to say sales.
You can say sales. Okay.
I'm going to say sales. I know that's where I started. And if you do not feel passionate about what you do and you cannot confidently, explain to the person that you can truly help how and why you are better and the best at what you do, if you're not comfortable with that, it's going to be tough. It's going to be
Yeah.
tough. The
I
rest
love
of it
that.
you can learn. Yeah.
It's such a trick question because without one of those, everything else falls, right? So it's such a trick question, but I love your answer. I do, because if you can't sell something, you can't monitor the finances because there's no finances to be monitored.
Right.
But it's the same thing. I tell people, like, if you don't market, well, you've got no leads. And how do you sell to no leads? So like
Right.
some people will say marketing is the most important because you can't
Yeah.
sell if you don't have leads. And if you can't
Yeah.
sell or you're bad at it and you convert 10% of the time, then you need more leads. But if you get
Yeah.
better at sales, then you don't need as many leads. And that's like, yeah,
Right.
you get. And then you're like, well, the operation side, well, how do you fulfill whatever they ordered if you don't have
Right.
operations set in place, right? And in HR,
Right.
how do you make sure that the things are being fulfilled if the right people aren't in the right places? And then,
Right.
well, if you don't monitor your finances, how do you know what your profit margin is and how much cash flow you actually have coming in? And so it's such a trick question, but I love
It
it. You were
is.
just like, I think sales. I love it. You just
Yeah.
popped it out there. Well, any final advice that you would give to people out there, just something that pops into your head that you're like, you know what? I wish I would have known this when I was younger. I wish I would have been taught this in business, or something you'd like to share with people that are listening.
Oh my gosh. I mean, there's so many things. I think that number one, you don't have to do it alone. And so I think that people like listening to your show and continuing to learn is fantastic. But remember that the execution is key, and just keep moving forward and put one step in front of the other. And if you're thinking about launching something or hiring or doing that next step, run some quick numbers and do it. Don't overthink it. And I think that it's just that delicate balancing act of doing enough research, make sure the model is healthy, and you know the metrics that you're going to measure every week, every day. Look at your metrics. That's my number one, I guess, is everything should have metrics. I just had a team meeting with my team. They're measured on their metrics every week in every department, not just sales and marketing. Everybody has a metric goal. We are quantifying every single thing that everybody's doing. So that's my number one. And just get out there and do it. Take your steps, take action, watch your metrics, and the sky's the limit.
That's awesome. Great advice. And just so you know, that trick question, that's why I don't put data or metrics or KPIs or numbers in it. Because if I ask an entrepreneur or business owner six things, what's most important, they're always, or at least they should always say their data.
Yeah,
Data
always.
is the most important. I was working with a company not too long ago. It was a consulting, or I was consulting them, and they were going to get rid of one section of their company. It was the custom build section of their company, and they said, well, because it's custom, it's taking longer. Therefore, da, da, da. And they said that's where the bottleneck is. And I said, well, before we do anything crazy, let's call in the people with the numbers, and we look through it. There was never a delay on the custom builds, and the custom builds produced 30% more revenue than their actual non-custom builds. The delay was in the shipping because they had a higher percentage of shipping going out of the non-custom builds. There was a backlog, and so they were about to shut down a portion of their business that produced a higher percentage of profit margin and was better put together, or the organization of it was better put together. And that's how important numbers are, because they would have
Yes.
felt that hurt in about 3 months. They'd have been like, what's the
Yep.
problem?
Yep. It is so important. The numbers are, I think everybody would have voted numbers if you had that as number
Oh,
six.
absolutely. That's
It's
why
the
it's a trick
most
question.
important.
That's why it's a trick question. Well, Kasey, this has been an absolute pleasure. I love talking to business with people that have been through it, that know some things and consult others in that. Anybody listening to this, they do need to check you out. They need to go to Instagram. They can check you out. How else can they find you? And we'll put those in
LinkedIn
the
and
show notes as
Instagram.
well.
Yeah,
LinkedIn.
definitely. LinkedIn and Instagram is where I am the most. I on Facebook too. So those three. You can find me on any of those. I have a weekly newsletter that I put out. So you can get that from any of my platforms. You can email me directly, KaseyD@KaseyD'Amato.com. And I would be happy to connect with you. Love to hear what people are doing in business. Happy to share any tips or insight, bounce around ideas. I love doing it. It's my mission to pay it forward. And it was a pleasure to be on your show today.
All right. Well, thanks, Kasey. I appreciate it. And you did drop some very important knowledge about business for sure. Um, Everybody, this has been another episode of Fix Your BS, where BS stands for belief systems, but we also talk about business systems and balance sheets. Those are the things we really talk about the most. Share this out with somebody, especially if they're an entrepreneur or they're thinking about starting a business, or if they own a business, because this information is vital to the success of their business. And if they're your friend or family member, you want them to succeed. That is how we reach more people, and that's how we help more people. Until next time, I'm your host, Dr. Greg Persley, also known as Dr. G, with another episode of Fix Your BS, where we help you build your life, your dream life on your terms.